Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Between Two Studs. I'm Alex Stud.
And I'm Ron Stud.
Ron, we're on episode 33 tonight.
Wow. That's awesome. One more, and I know that, like, when we started, it was like, okay, we got to, like, 5 or 6, and we're like, yeah, we're putting up those big numbers. Now it's like we're getting into the 30s, and I'm like, I really didn't think we'd make it this far, so congratulations.
Well, we are officially past a number of podcasts episodes beyond my years of life. So we're really cooking. We're really moving. So tonight we have special guest Brian Paladie on the call. Brian, you know what? I didn't even ask beforehand. Did I pronounce your last name correctly?
Half my family would say yes, half my family would say no. So we pronounce it two ways. So Paladie is the way that half my family says it, and my half of the family says Paladie.
Well, you know, it's funny. So, and we'll get into it. We used to work together, and it was one of those things where, you know, people would just pronounce your name, and you'd hear and you wouldn't correct anybody. So it's just sort of like, oh, I assume that's actually how it's pronounced. A lot of people are just nice people who aren't going to actually correct you if you're wrong. So you... Yeah,
and what does wrong mean? You know, like, if half my family says it one way, like, maybe I'm the one who's wrong.
I guess that's true. Well, love it. So thank you very much for joining. And first part of the show, as always, we go into the Amber Round. The Amber Round starts off, as always, how do you know us? What's the story?
How do I know you?
Yes.
What's the story? So Alex and I worked together. He was my right-hand man in marketing. And so it started out as, you know, we had to go to meetings every now and then, together. He was forced into coming to meetings with me. But really, I think we hit it off really fast. So as best you can be friends with somebody when you're communicating mostly via Slack and on Zoom meetings, Alex and I became buds at work. Because of COVID restrictions and all of that, we never actually got to meet in the flesh.
Isn't that crazy?
Which is really unfortunate. Isn't it? Yeah, I know. I feel like I know you really well, but, you know, never, only in a virtual world.
This is what we're most.
Alex and I know
this is what we're most comfortable with: looking at each other through computer screens.
Honestly, if I met you like on the street, I might not even recognize you.
Well, Brian, for all I know, you're like 7'5".
Yeah, it's actually 7'4", but on my profiles I said.
Yeah, when you wear your platforms.
Yeah. No, I've never even opened a dating app. I have no idea. I've been with my wife. We've been married 2 years. We've been together for 18.
Wow.
So we started dating before text messaging was really even a thing.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
So with that, you mentioned your wife. Tell us a little bit more about yourself. What are your interests? What are your hobbies?
Interests and hobbies. So they've shifted over the years. I've got a lot of interest in coffee. I love travel and cooking. Travel is something that I really haven't had a big opportunity to do much of because of COVID. So we've got a lot of pent up energy for things that we want to do, ambitions that we have. So yeah, just love doing those kinds of things. I studied abroad in college. I learned French, and so any opportunity I have to do something that's a little francophile, I like to be able to do that. You know, speak French with people or just kind of catch up on French films and whatever. I don't get to do as much as I'd really like to, but that's, you know, it's interesting to be able to still have that in the back pocket.
Yeah, well, and we'll certainly get into some of those. I know it was funny when we were working together. You were my buddy in planning my honeymoon, because I was saying, oh, I'm going to Maui, and you were like, oh, let me tell you, I got some recommendations. So then there was like a month where every call we had, there was like 5 minutes before we really got going. We're like, all right, hold on real quick. We got to talk about this real quick. So that was very helpful.
Yeah, you bet. Actually, one of the things I don't know that I could like do this at scale, but one of the things I absolutely love is like when people like ask me for a recommendation. So like someone could like text me like, hey, I'm going to be in this neighborhood in the city. Like, what do you recommend for dinner? I'm like, okay, well, how big's the group you're with? You know, what kind of tastes do you do? So like, I love being like the recommendations guy, and mostly because like I get so much out of personal recommendations from other people. Mm-hmm. You know, just like goes so truly. So I kind of like, I love to like pay it forward if I could be helpful and helping shape somebody's experience. I love to be able to do it.
So have you ever had? I mean, I love giving recommendations too, but have you ever given a recommendation and then they tell you later, like, that was complete shit. Why did you recommend that? Does that ever happen?
They either are too polite to tell me that, or I'm just like killing it on the recommendations.
Yeah, I'm always. It's kind of like the whole like you recommend a YouTube video and you watch it in front of somebody, right? You're just like, oh, check out this video, and they're always like, I just tell me, is it not funny? Is it bad? Just tell me.
Well, yeah, and then usually there's like an ad before it too, so you're like, oh my god, this is like the funniest video, and then you have to watch like a Burbo ad for like 18 seconds.
And then you're just like, okay, and then you're waiting to be like, is this interesting? Do you find this? And they're just kind of like...
Well, and you're like looking at them as they're watching the video.
Making them uncomfortable nonetheless, right?
Yeah.
It's always kind of an awkward thing.
I was in a band in high school. I play guitar and bass, and we wrote our own music, and we recorded, and we were playing gigs. Like we were going to make it big. And I really liked the music we did. I still enjoy it, but still, like, here I am, like, 20 years later playing it for people. I'm like, so what do you think? Pretty good, right? I'm like, it's 20-year-old music that I wrote in high school, but, I'm still a fan.
I love that.
Cool.
So we are entering a very traditional part of the show, and from what I understand, you're going to be joining us. So we announced a couple weeks ago that Malort agreed to be the official sponsor of Between Two Studs, the official spirit. And Ron and I, we have been drinking Malort, I think, on every single episode. And it's always great when we have someone on in the Chicagoland area because guess what? They get to partake with us. So, Brian, cheers to you. Thank you for being on the show. Toast.
Cheers, guys. Thanks for having me.
Anytime.
Smooth like butter.
So smooth.
Smooth. Like something.
So this is the shot that we're consuming, of course. Oh, and by the way, I don't know if you can see this. I got this at an establishment that you told me about. This is a Wally's shot glass.
Oh.
Which we're going to talk about Wally's a little bit later as well. It's a magical place. But that was just the shot. We always like to go around. What are you consuming while we're going through the podcast? What are you sipping on?
All right, so I have got an English Pale Ale. That's a home brew from one of my good friends. So he brewed up some beer, and I got to take his home brew, and it's in a marble brewery glass. And I got this glass from Marble Brewery in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I stood up in a wedding several years ago, and it was a dry wedding. But the other groomsmen, it was like a Mormon thing. It was just whatever. But it was still a very fun wedding. Yeah. But in between the ceremony and the reception, me and a groomsman and I, in our tuxes, stopped into a brewery, Marble, and had a flight there. And I picked up a glass, and then we proceeded on to the wedding after that. So just like a little bit of an interim experience I had randomly in Albuquerque.
And you said, "Can I keep the glass?" Is that the glass or just a glass?
Oh, they made me buy my own glass. I mean, I did like the flight.
Oh, got it.
Had to purchase a glass. Yeah.
Still, that is a great way to combat dry weddings. If you can
combat
fit that
sobriety.
Right. You got to do your part with weddings. I mean,
look, it was a very nice wedding. Loved the couple. I think it was because of the religious affiliation. Sure. So luckily, the other groomsmen were like, no, we're good. We got flasks, and you need some. We got some stuff in the trunk too. So it was, I didn't really notice much of a difference.
Hopefully, someone had some Malort.
No, it was in Albuquerque. I don't know. It was Albuquerque like 10 years ago.
I'm not kidding. I mentioned this. I mentioned this earlier, a couple episodes ago. So I got married back in the summer, and I brought a case of Malort to Pittsburgh. Put it in my car, loaded it up. We went out there. We cleaned out almost the whole thing, almost an entire case.
Just on the ride there?
No, can you imagine? No, through the ceremony, or not the ceremony. I guess that's the reception. It was incredible.
After the reception, yeah, a lot of people were mixing it with everything, and some people were doing just shots of it. From the podcast, we've actually got several people who have a morose curiosity about trying it. So they had to try it because it was there. So that, I think, also helped.
What was the consensus?
I didn't hear too much that was surprising. I think everyone kind of, it is what it is. You're not like going, ooh, that's smooth and sweet. You're usually like,
Generally speaking, as you know, most people hate it. But there is that small percentage of people who just find it, fall in love with it. So,
and they're called two-fisted drinkers, right?
That's right. Ron?
I think, I'm going to be honest. I haven't had a sip of Malort in, I'm going to say, years.
That right there was your first sip in years?
In years. And I have to say, I think one of the reasons why people love to hate it is I think it's just got an allure to it. Like, it really does not taste as, like, polarizing as its allure might suggest. And it tasted fine. It was just like, hey, it's interesting. It's got a different kind of flavor to it. But it's not like, having not had it for so long and having an expectation of what it was going to taste like, I gotta say, it was not what I expected in a very pleasant way.
I love that. Well, and we're going to get into it later, but my theory, and I've told this before, I think people who like more bitter flavors, which I look at tea, I look at bitter or coffee. I think if you like more bitter flavors, I think you're more likely to enjoy the flavor. Because I think the average American palate is very sweet, very flavorful, and I think they just get really turned off by the taste of Malort.
I love that hypothesis, and it seems to ring true for me because I like bitter pale ales, and I like coffee, and I don't know what the bitterness scale is, but when I love Scotch, and I love really smoky, peaty Scotch. Yeah. So maybe it's in that same like realm.
Maybe so. Speaking of which, Ron, what are you drinking right now? And I know you're doing your 75-day thing. Yeah, we heard it. What are you drinking?
I'm making good progress on that, though. Tonight I'm having some 10 Ren Tung Ting Oolong. So it's a nice oolong. It's a little bit better than I think a lot of the traditional store chain stuff, but it's very, very kind of middle of the road. Good stuff. What about you, Alex?
So I am consuming, I might mispronounce this. It's not a Scotch, but it kind of tastes similar to a Scotch. I'm drinking a Japanese whiskey, 8-year-old Kuroyoshi. I don't know. Tastes pretty good. It's not peaty though. It's not smoky at all. It's definitely like more of a smoother taste, but it's enjoyable. So cheers, brothers.
Cheers.
Cheers.
All right. So one of the things that we always ask all of our guests is this really interesting question about what your favorite piece of art is that represents you. And when it comes to art, that could be anything. We've had some people go on about a song, for instance, to personal life experience, to a movie, TV show, you name it. Art is one of those great things where it can be so personal to everybody. So what would that piece be for you?
Ooh, I would say it's a body of work, and it has to be the Beatles. I am a really big Beatles fan. I grew up all over the country. One of the places I lived as a kid was Alaska. Mm-hmm. And when I was in probably first grade, we went to a record store. They still called them record stores, even though they were selling cassettes and CDs. And my parents let me pick anything I wanted. I saw this album that looked so cool. It was black and white, and you'd have these guys. There's 4 guys on the cover of this album, half bathed in light, and the other half was dark. And I thought it was the coolest looking thing, and it was with the Beatles. Was it the second album from the Beatles? Because their first one was "Please Please Me," and I immediately fell in love with the band and have been like a total Beatles fan like my entire music listening life.
Well, so I have 2 immediate questions. First, if you had to pick one album, and then number 2, who's your favorite Beatle?
Yep. If I had to pick one album, I think it's going to be Sgt. Pepper's. Catch Me on a Certain Day, and it's going to be Abbey Road.
Abbey Road's mine.
Yeah, I mean, they're just fantastic albums. Favorite Beatles, Paul McCartney. That one's actually pretty easy. My first concert ever was Ringo Starr. So I've seen Ringo Starr twice with his all-star band, and I have seen Paul McCartney 3 times.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
I've never seen John Lennon because he was not with us by the time I was born.
Yeah.
Ron and I.
George Harrison by chance?
George. Yeah, I never got a chance to see George either.
I was going to say, Ron, I don't know if you've changed over the last couple of years, but you and I used to both be George guys. George was on our Quiet Beatle.
What's your favorite George song?
I really like Apple Scruffs, oddly enough.
Yeah, I think his solo stuff.
I think it kind of pays homage to, some of the Apple fans. Not the Apple computer, but just the Apple records, right?
Right.
And I don't know, I just always thought that George always had kind of an interesting kind of... I liked a lot of his melodies that he would kind of go for, and some of the content of the actual songs I always kind of liked. He would kind of have those very spiritual songs, and then he'd kind of have just the more kind of just fun and relaxed songs. And Got My Mind Set on You is another great song where it's like, and it's kind of weird. You know how some songs just have a certain timelessness about it? That is one of those songs where, even though it's from the 80s, you hear it and it just kind of gets you moving. So,
I agree. Like the energy of that song and like George's songwriting is pretty fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, the entire album, All Things Must Pass, which was his first solo album, post Beatles.
Yeah,
you could tell he had this entire repertoire of songs that he was not able to get on to a Beatles record, and so he just came out as a double album. And I don't think there's a bad track on that double album. Now, I will say this: there was some I love George. But like late 70s, early 80s, there's some not so good music. There is some questionable music in there. But then he had this resurgence.
Yeah, that's
right before he died. Like, what was it? All Things Must Pass. Was that his last album?
No. Like, All Things Must Pass was his first album. But what ended up happening in the late 80s?
What was his last one?
Oh, I don't even know, Ron. But in the late 80s, that's when he joined the band, the Traveling Wilburys.
Traveling Wilburys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which was with Bob Dylan.
Which is a crazy, like, super band. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was awesome, right? So he had some great stuff then, and yeah, he definitely ended out on more of a positive note. But there was a lull where there was garbage.
Well, there's a couple things I have to say. So one, I should probably note that the first dance at my wedding was also a Beatles song. Was All You Need Is Love.
Love it.
Nice, very classic.
So it was the first dance for my wife and me. Yeah, she's a big fan too. The second thing is what you just said about like the repertoire of George Harrison, right? Like I think there's always the great debate about the Stones or the Beatles, who's the greater band, and pretty clear where I stand on that argument. However, the Beatles as the Beatles were like 1956 at the earliest to like 1970 when they were officially done,
yep.
Right? But the Beatles as we know them was like 62 to like 68, 69, really. Mm-hmm. So they had like a very small window where they were very prolific, and that's all we have to judge them by as the Beatles, right? Is like those like monster hits, those fantastic albums. The Stones had, they've been doing stuff since the 60s
years.
Into the
yeah.
Right? So they're gonna be like they're bound to have some highs, some peaks, some valleys throughout that. So there's just more to critique and a lot more like change over time. So I guess in that sense, like they've been doing it, like OG rock stars. Like there's no rock stars that are doing it quite like the Stones have. And then we're judging the Beatles in this like really small window of time. If they had stayed together till now, like maybe they'd have some, I doubt it, but they might have some, some not so fresh hits.
Listen, I'm sure I'm going to piss some people off, but I don't even think it's a fair comparison. Like I've never even thought the Rolling Stones are in the same category. And again, I know some people are going to take offense to that. I just don't think they are. Like no band in modern music today has more influence than the Beatles. And of course you can play the game, well, the Beatles were influenced by so-and-so, right? Elvis.
Sure.
But music today, the foundation is the Beatles. I don't think the foundation is the Rolling Stones.
Yeah. I think maybe, I don't know. I think maybe a better comparison is, I don't know, maybe Led Zeppelin, right? And here's why. I feel like the Stones have always been, I think, very much good, solid rock, right? But I feel like, at least for Led Zeppelin, I feel like they kind of went into a few different directions where, yeah, they had a little bit of metal, they had a little bit of classical, they had a little bit of everything in there. And that's something that I would credit the Beatles specifically. Like, between all of their albums, there's so much variety and influence in music. It's not the same album. Every single album is distinctly different. And I think for being as popular as they were, having that high of expectations into every album that they recorded to continue to produce musical hits that stand up years and years later for what they are, and also had so much variety, I think that that's the part that I would maybe argue a little bit against the Stones. But, and I'm not even saying that the Led Zeppelins may be on the same page, but I would say maybe that might be the better comparison if I was to make that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Beatles records, especially like if you listen to them in sequence, you can hear the phases just absolutely shift. Mm-hmm. And when you think what you were doing 5 years ago versus what the Beatles did 5 years ago, like the Get Back documentary that just came out, right? Like these guys are at the end of their Beatles career. Like they've written all the hits, they've, you know, like toured all that, and they're like 29, right. 28. Right.
It's nuts.
And they're like these grizzled veterans of music, and they're in the studio and they're just kind of like grinding it out. And like you see Paul McCartney, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but there's like this awesome moment where he's just like strumming a bass, you know, and then like he's just kind of sitting there, like George is like yawning and Ringo's sitting there clapping a little bit, and like he's writing Get Back out of thin air. And, you know, he's just from sitting like strumming. Like I play bass and I don't strum a bass to write a song. You know what I mean? Like you're writing a song on a guitar and then you like figure out how to play bass to it. And he's just like, I'm just going to do this. And he's got a melody. Get back, get back. And you're like, what is this?
It's
so
nuts.
Like that process. And like, you know, and I know the Get Back is like, it was sort of like a, not exactly, you know, the songwriting, you know, like the process that it was like every time they wrote an album. But pretty phenomenal to see a part of that process at play, and just kind of realizing that, like, you know, they didn't just, with the exception of the song Yesterday, where apparently Paul McCartney just like woke up one morning, went to the piano and played the song Yesterday and thought he like subconsciously was ripping it off from somebody. So like, aside from like literally rolling out of bed and writing a hit, you know, it's a process, and it's a good reminder that, you know, it's you know, that there's a lot of thought that goes into it, a lot of reworking, a lot of consultation with each other, and really kind of piecing these things together. Like anything that you're doing, that, you know, it doesn't just manifest out of thin air. So I think like having those creative energies all in the same room at the same time to like add that is just phenomenal. And I think that's probably where George probably struggled, is like when you're bringing great hits to the table, but you're up against, you know, John Lennon and Paul McCartney. Right. It's like, oh, man, that is.
Yeah. Well, and it's crazy to think. I remember reading somewhere by 1970, and this is what, 4 years after they stopped touring, they had like direct employees working for to sustain the Beatles. 200 people. There were 200 people supporting the band, right? That they weren't traveling. When the band broke up in 1970, 200 people lost their job, right? Like, and so it's crazy, because I think we think about the four guys, and there's always who's the fifth Beatle? Right? You know, there's debates on that. But this was like an incredible business, and I don't mean to take away the art that was there, but this was a juggernaut, and this was incredible. So I don't know.
Yeah, actually, I don't know how that compares, because you think about like any musician today, like there's like a team of songwriters and producers, and you know, like I actually don't know. Like hearing 200 people sounds like a lot. Maybe in like 1970, it was like mind blowing the number of people that were, you know, part of the business of the band. But maybe the way that like record companies are established now, and like subcontractors and all that, like I don't know how that compares today.
That's fair.
But I think back then, you know, like what these guys doing. So that's actually funny in the Get Back documentary. Have you guys seen it, by the way?
On my list.
It's great. Especially when you know the technology that goes into it, like, you know, using AI to identify who's speaking so they can like isolate the vocal tracks.
That's
to
cool.
Like make it seem really cool. It's really cool. But you see this guy, it's like really, he looks like a gentle giant, and he's got a hammer and an anvil, and he's hitting it, and it's like, the song Maxwell's Silver Hammer that later was on Abbey Road. He's the guy that's hitting, the anvil, right? So it's like literally hitting it with a hammer. And his name's Mal Evans, and like having read several books and watching different documentaries and stuff, like I knew the name Mal Evans. I'm like, oh, that's what Mal Evans looks like. And he was like their tour manager, right? And he just seems like this gentle giant guy. And you're like, so like, oh, that you put a name, with the face, and that you put it all together. And he's just like casually there, but he's like got access to the Beatles. Like he's, not the guy that's on stage, but he's the guy that's right off stage, and like they always knew him, and he's probably like all these parties and stuff. So I'm like, he seems like such a nice guy. Whatever happened to him? So I looked at Wikipedia to figure out what happened to this dude. Horrible ending to his life. He ended up in LA, and like I think he had some sort of like dispute with his girlfriend or something, and the LAPD showed up, and he had I don't know if it was a real gun or a fake gun, but he went and put down a gun, and he ended up getting shot to death by the police.
Oh, I can never listen to that song not that much the same way again. He was the guy hitting the anvil?
Yeah. This guy hit the anvil.
Oh my gosh, that's nuts.
It's not what I expected. I expected oh, he's probably living in, I don't know, Wales or something, just kind of, maybe he's in Scotland on an estate, making, that Beatles money that's still rolling in or whatever. No, he had a horrible end to his life. It's like, it really surprised me. So you never know what you're going to find out when you like pop over to Wikipedia after watching a movie or a show.
You really go down the rabbit hole. Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, listen.
Yeah, insane.
For sake of time, I'm just going to call it. You passed the Ember round. What do you think, Ron?
I think he totally did. And with that, I'm still working on this, Alex, but we'll make it work. We'll make it work.
Oh, you're going to edit it in later? Oh, there you go. There you go. Yeah. So we're going to dive right into some of the meat and potatoes, right? Of the questions. Right. I found it interesting. So you and I worked together for about a year. I had no idea until I was stalking your LinkedIn, and I saw that you interned for Barack Obama when he was a senator for Illinois. Can you talk about that? That's crazy.
Yeah, it was a super cool life experience. So I studied political science as an undergrad and was looking into internships, and I applied to be an intern with Senator Dick Durbin, and crestfallen when I got the rejection letter. But there was another senator that was up and coming in the great state of Illinois, and so I applied to be part of his Senate office, his district office in Chicago, and went for an interview. It was one of the when I must have been a junior. Yeah, I was a junior in college, and like hadn't really had much interview experience up to that point. So my interview actually took place at a au bon pain in the city with his scheduler, so the person who was head of his entire Illinois scheduling team, and we just had a great chat, and like, oh, this just feels great. And then I got the offer, and before I knew it, I was interning in the scheduling department for then Senator Barack Obama. I stayed on for 3 internship sessions, so I transitioned from scheduling and then started doing some constituent services work. So I did some work for healthcare and immigration. So I was able to help constituents in a couple of those areas. So it was a phenomenal experience.
Wow. And so while you were interning, was there, because the DNC, they had been grooming this guy. I mean, he had one of the great speeches at the 2004 DNC convention. There was sort of there must have been, right? I mean, I was young, but there must have been some sort of air in the room of, hey, do you think this guy he's going to run for president? Like, what was going on? Was that a whisper in the office?
Yeah, I mean, there was no doubt that he had like an aura of celebrity about him. So it wasn't just like, oh, I guess I'm going to go intern in this other, this other senator's office. Like, I knew it was something special, and I was really grateful to have gotten rejected by Senator Durbin's office because, the rock star was really Barack Obama. And, so I worked in scheduling first, right? So I always knew when he was going to be in the office, and I actually knew where he was going to be a lot of the time. A lot of confidential information I was privy to as a 20-year-old. Mm-hmm. And so the other intern who worked in scheduling, we became good friends. We knew he was going to come in. We're like, oh, he's coming today. He's coming at, like noon or whatever. Like, let's make sure that, we're in his, sight line when he comes in. So maybe we can meet him. What's really phenomenal about this guy is that, there's a lot of politicians who are like, oh, good to meet you, and they, just kind of phony about it. There's a sense of just like real authenticity about him because he walks past us because we were in his, we're strategically positioned. Mm-hmm. He walks past us, stops, turns around, looks at me and says, I don't know you yet. Mm. And he introduced himself. Of course, I knew who he was. I introduced myself. And he looks over at the other guy. He goes, watch out for him, though. He's trouble. And he knew my intern colleague from the D.C. district office. So he had worked there and then came over. So like what was cool about that moment was like he first knew that he had never seen me before and then knew the guy from the other office, right? So it's like it's not that phony, politician, oh, it's good to meet you, like, oh, whatever. It's like just something about that, knowing that like, hey, he had that like moment of real recognition and made a point to say hello. So he was also super approachable. So I was there for like 3 internship cycles, and he would always meet with the interns. He always made it a priority to have at least 1 hour lunch with the interns. And we'd go into this conference room. He would just be with us, closed doors, ask him anything you want. Like totally transparent, anything you want, you could ask him and he would answer honestly. So
did you ask him about Area 51?
No, I should have. Man,
he might not have known.
He wasn't president yet.
As a senator, he might not have known that.
As a senator, yeah.
He was the junior senator from the state of Illinois. So anyway, so I to answer your question, Alex, I asked him. I was the one. So I was. We were in this room and people were asking questions, and I said, Senator Obama, there's, a lot of talk about, you potentially, running for president. Is that something that you're actually considering? And his response was, I can't do an Obama impression, so you're gonna have to like.
I can barely do it. Just
yeah. Okay. He's like, well, Brian, think about basketball. If you're playing basketball in your backyard, what are you dreaming of? I'm like, are you dreaming of going pro? Dreaming of the NBA? He's like, you're right. Once you get to the NBA, what are you thinking about? Like, thinking about a championship ring. He's like, exactly. So you get to the Senate, and you've made it, and you're thinking about what could be next. So that might be something that might be on my mind. And I was like, that's awesome. Like he just told me he's gonna run for president.
And it wasn't
like that was
and
pretty
it wasn't
cool.
like a political answer. Like that was a That was
an honest
one. You read between the tea leaves. That's a yes. I'm gonna run for president.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is, I love that. I mean, he's such a basketball guy too that he like used a basketball analogy for it, and you can probably tell I'm a really good basketball player. I'm 5'10" on a good day. I've got I got this like really great arm span.
You never played him.
It was pretty cool, like, to use a basketball analogy.
On the basketball court?
No, I didn't get a chance to. Had a couple of fun run-ins with him though. He was actually just a really funny, personable human. Like I think he probably gave that off as like president. He had a lot of serious moments as president too, but like in terms of like personality, just had some funny moments. This actually didn't happen to me specifically, but a couple of the interns were going down in the elevator with him, and there's like a revolving door to get outside, and there was a female intern and a male intern, and there's like awkward vestibules, like you go through the door, and so the other intern just kind of like gestured, and the female intern went first, and then Senator Obama pushed the guy into the vestibule with the other intern and then got him behind and like ran really fast. So they got stuck in. So they all kind of like tumbled out. And he just casually looked and goes, do you always just make your way and jump in with strangers in a revolving door? And the intern's like, what do I say? Like, what do I do? So he just like played it off like really cool. Like he's just like praying to them, because of course, you're going to, what do you do in that situation when the senators, kind of messing with you?
That's awesome. I have to say too, I like the story about him calling out your friend, being like, "Watch out for this guy, he's trouble." If I was that guy, like I would have that printed on my tombstone. President Barack Obama, watch out for this guy, he's trouble. Put that on engrave it on my tombstone. I would like that.
Yeah. Speaking of an engraving though, I wrote an article about my internship experience for my college paper, and anything that was published needed to, from somebody in the staff needed to be, get signed off by the team. So there are a couple of people who are like some pretty big names, like David Axelrod was there one day, and then Robert Gibbs was there,
Wow.
and Robert Gibbs needed to like authorize this article that I'd written
That's
for
incredible.
my college paper. So like he had to like give it a thumbs up, and then Senator Obama, or I don't know if Senator Obama, President Obama, whatever. So President Obama, I asked, would you mind signing this? Like I wrote this piece for my paper, and would you mind signing it? And he read it, and then he wrote, "You're a great writer, Barack Obama."
Wow.
Like,
And you, I assume you have that
so like I've got that
somewhere out in your house.
Yeah. It's kind of in storage now because we moved and things are kind of getting, situated. But yeah, I do have a frame frame version of that. So I have it framed, and I have a couple copies of it too in case it deteriorated. So yeah, that's pretty wild.
That's really cool. It's interesting. Like a U.S. senator, and I know your sample size is one, but I've always wondered how often, and you handled scheduling, how often is a senator actually in their home state versus in D.C.? You being the scheduling guy, what do you remember, like, roughly how often that is?
Yeah, it's not as often as like you might want to think it is. And then when he was there, a lot of the things he was doing, like there was a lot of events that he was at, so like giving speeches at like maybe like factories or towns, whatever. So like, really like economic development things. So they're usually, pretty aligned to like what the political agenda was, right? So, economic development or education, healthcare. So there's a lot of that kind of thing that will happen. A lot of the constituent interaction with the candidate actually happens in DC. There's like, I think it was something that was called like constituents and coffee, where like constituents kind of come in and like have some like FaceTime. And that was in DC, but yeah, it actually not as often as you might think, unfortunately. And like the number of invitations, so a lot of the work that we did for scheduling was, vetting invitations that would come in for him to either lend his likeness or appearance or write something. So I spent a lot of time on the phones, unfortunately declining a lot of things because you get like hundreds of requests a week, and I'd have to like call. And this one guy was like, I was an intern at the time, and I had to call. He was like a very prominent attorney in Chicago, and he was like, "Yeah, I talked to this other person, and they put me on the phone with some intern to that I couldn't do this." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm very sorry to hear that, sir. Yeah, no,
interns suck.
I didn't want to out myself as an intern." Yeah. But yeah, no, I'm very sorry, but unfortunately, his schedule, he's got to be in DC that day. He's not going to be able to make it. Really appreciates the sentiment of your invitation for him, but he sends his best regards, like that kind of thing. So yeah, they aren't around as much as you think. And I don't think what I got a sense of this then, and have gotten more so, later in life, that like the amount of actual work that a politician does or a congressperson does is like it's not as much of the work that you think they should be doing, right? In terms of like meeting with constituents, reading legislation, drafting legislation, the things you think they're doing. A lot of what they're doing is is fundraising. Actually, so much of it is fundraising, and a lot of it is just like not exactly what you would think of what a politician is elected to do. And I think that's just more the system than anything else. If like if you're not constantly fundraising, then you're at risk of losing your seat. So like what good is being in the seat if you can't sustain it and can't like progress your agenda or what your constituents elected you to do. So just it's very, very troubling the amount of fundraising that they end up doing.
Yeah. Final question.
So scheduling. So scheduling question for you. I think I've seen this before where some politicians, and I want to say even royalty in some cases, has been invited just kind of on a whim to like a wedding or a birthday party. Did you ever see any of cases where President Obama or Senator Obama then was just like, yeah, Ron's having a kegger this weekend. You're invited. And he's just like, why not? He seems like a nice guy. Has that ever happened to you?
Yeah, there were tons of invitations like that,
okay.
But it was part of our job to politely decline them and
throw them out.
Unfortunately, we wouldn't throw them out. Actually, it was a really good system we had because everybody got a response.
Okay.
So there were like literally hundreds, and that's why there were a couple of us interns, working at like I wasn't doing a lot of the high level scheduling things. I wasn't like strategically making sure it was that was what the scheduler would do. But the interns we responded to a lot of those requests. And like the program that was in place was actually really, really world class, because whether you were inviting him to we literally got backyard barbecue invitations, just like you said. But we also got really prominent things, and those are the ones that we wanted to make sure that we shortlisted and vetted, and really kind of made it into consideration for the schedule. But they either got actually everybody got a letter and a phone call from us. So I got into sales, and a big part of it was just banging those calls, calling strangers and saying, hey, Ron, thank you so much for inviting Senator Obama to your Bills party this Sunday. He would love to make it. Unfortunately, his schedule precludes him from being able to participate, but deeply appreciates you thinking of him. I mean, 20 years later, I still got the talk track down, so, it's just, so everybody got a call from us. We cataloged everything. Everybody got a written letter as well, thanking them for the invitation, but unfortunately can't make it. In some cases, they said, hey, we'd like to learn more information and see what we can do. So it was a cool experience to be able to see the actual process, and the professionalism, and really how seriously we took it.
Any suggestions on how to cut to the line, for people to say, ooh, this Ron Studd's Bills party does sound pretty good. Thanks for coloring that envelope with a nice little, I heart Obama on it.
I assume that's the scheduler.
Know the scheduler.
Okay.
Yeah, that helped. Yeah, knowing the schedule would help. I think, honestly, cream rises to the top. So if you were a known name or something, then there's a little bit more of a attention you might get. But honestly, there were certain things that I was trying to lobby for him to participate in, and I knew it would be a great fit. And the truth of the matter is, when they say schedule precludes, honestly, it could be that it could be full intention of being somewhere, but he's got to be in DC for a vote that day.
Yeah.
Or is traveling. I think at the time he was traveling to Russia's nuclear non-proliferation thing, visiting missile silos in Russia or something. So it's he's gonna be out of the country. There's certain things that are just bigger than even a very well-known celebrity or something like that. So tough to cut the line.
So I have to ask, not in a disparaging way at all, but I'm very curious. I think when we think of someone like Obama, right, or even just a celebrity, we think of them almost in a way that they're not a human being, right? It's like they don't use the restroom, right? I guess what I'm asking is, were there any quirks, funny little anecdotal things that you saw that you're like, wow, he's really a human. He's a dude.
You meet him and he instantly seems like a human. Yeah. I mean, he just says he's really funny. He's really, really funny. And I think he had some jokes, and I don't know how well they always translated in press conferences and things like that. But he also had I think a good sense of self, right? So it's self-awareness. There's this one time his office was on the 39th floor of the federal building in Chicago, and on the 40th floor was Senator Durbin. So he was the senior, senator. And I happened to be in the office this day that he was there, strategically placed, of course, so that I could be, near him and he could remember who I was. And I heard him just look around at his staff members and go, Durbin's office is nicer than mine. A lot nicer. Just really casually, just and I swear the next day people were in there painting the walls, the old carpet was getting fixed, whatever. But he was just sort of offhand joking oh, his office is nicer, a lot nicer. And it was true. It was kind of a shabbier office that he had inherited. He'd just taken office shortly before I got there. And so just it's kind of moving into an apartment that they didn't really paint the walls here before I moved in, did they? Just that, the same thing that we're gonna say it's a nice place, but we gotta rip up this carpet and these walls have got to go. So yeah. Anyway, so just moments like that, and again him, doing that, little prank or whatever, giving a little nudge to the interns in the door, he's just a funny guy, just always has something funny to say. And I asked him a question as well on, he was writing a book at the time, so he'd written Dreams for My Father, and he was writing The Audacity of Hope. I think that was the next book that was coming out. And I asked him hey, how does it go? Again, in the context of he's meeting with all these interns, we all get a chance to ask questions, and my turn to ask a question popped up, and I said, so how's the book going? And it was the most human response. He wasn't oh, it's excellent. I've got some really, really great ideas, and I think it's really going to be the, shape the American mindset. It wasn't anything like that. He's like, well, I work all day, and I come home and, I have dinner with Michelle and the girls, and then they put them to bed, and, then it's, it's dark and it's late out, and I got to write. And so I sit down and I open up Microsoft Word and I write a little title, and I take my mouse and I highlight some stuff and I scroll up and down.
And sometimes
and then I write a couple things. Yeah, it's like the same thing. You got to write a paper for college. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I got my header.
Format.
Like I'm
really
ready to go.
Good.
Like I put a title, format. Yeah, double space, and like and you start like playing around. And you're like highlighting stuff, and you're kind of like, oh, and like he just like humanized that experience of writing. Like just a long day, and like he's got to do it, but like it's not like words are just flowing from his brain through his fingertips. They were just like, yeah, just highlight some stuff, and I scroll a little bit.
That's awesome. Listen, we're gonna go to break. This has been a lot of fun talking about your experience as an intern. When we come back, I'm really excited to talk about one of your passions, which is coffee. I think that'll be really fun to talk about. So we'll be right back.
Sounds great.
Hey, it's Ron here. And Alex and I wanted to take a moment first to thank you for being a listener to our podcast. Secondly, I've got a challenge for you. This week, if you could, find somebody who maybe isn't familiar with the show and turn them onto it. We'd appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Welcome back to the show. We're sitting here with Brian. We were talking all about his time interning for then Senator Obama. We're going to talk about coffee, his fascination. But first, I have to quickly talk about, I kind of foreshadowed it earlier when I was drinking out of this little shot glass. It's by Wally's. I remember I was doing a little mini road trip, like literally just staying in Illinois, and Brian said, "Oh, you gotta stop at Wally's." And I was like, "What's Wally's?" And then all of a sudden, the entire conversation, I think it was a half an hour meeting, that meeting just got completely ruined. We just talked about Wally's. Can you, for the listener, talk about this amazing establishment?
Yeah. So my wife and I don't necessarily take road trips together. I did a lot as a kid, and I've done a lot of road trips, but like she and I, just not like a thing that we've done. But early in the pandemic, we were so eager for a vaccine that was going to cure everything that my wife would make a joke and say, like, she's like, I'd literally go to a gas station to get the vaccine if it were there. So what ended up happening is that in the state of Illinois, there were counties that were able to distribute vaccines if you're like 18 and over, and it was like county by county. So as long as you were like a resident of the state, you could go get a vaccine, right? So the county we lived in and the counties nearby weren't yet doing that, but we found out that counties in the far reaches of Illinois were opening this up. So we discovered that Greene County, which is almost St. Louis, was enabling the appointments for everybody, and we were just eager to kind of get back into life, and we're like, hey, let's take a road trip and let's make this happen. So it's like a 4.5 hour trip each way. So it's like a 9 or 10 hour, driving experience there and back. And we get onto Interstate 55 on our way. It's sort of like just like directly like southwest is Greene County from Chicago. And, as you do on road trips, you got to make a pit stop every now and then. And we're driving down 55 and we start seeing these billboards for like cleanest bathrooms ever kind of thing. Like, it's just like, there's like the weirdest billboards you're seeing. Like, what is this? Like as you get like closer and closer, like, all right, we got to check this place out. And it was for Wally's. So we pull into Wally's, and Wally's has like a, almost like a welcome to Vegas sign outside of it. It's just like huge, like I say gas station and convenience store, but like if you're looking at that like on steroids, I think there's something like 30 or 40 gas pumps there, and like this just massive convenience store situation. And you walk in, there's a motorhome inside of this place, and you can like buy stuff there, like camping supplies outside of the motorhome. There's a bar, there's a popcorn stand, there's like a deli and like a full deli, like I think there's like a donut shop. There's an entire wall of beef jerky.
The popcorn stands.
There's like all the drinks. Yeah, popcorn stands, and they didn't lie. Cleanest bathrooms I can recall. And so they didn't lie about that. And that was our main reason for going in there. But it just like absolutely blew my mind just how cool this place was. It was like I could see that if like this were something where I was regularly getting on a 55 to like, take a trip, like that would be my spot. I would have to stop. Like I would have to stop at Wally's every time I was there. Just like you don't see that everywhere, and it just kind of blew my mind. So, we went, we stopped there on the way there that day, and then on the way back, we got to make sure we stopped at Wally's. And then when we had to go for our second shot, same deal, like, hey, we got to stop at Wally's. So it quickly became a road trip tradition for a couple that didn't really do road trips together. And so when I got back, Alex was like, oh, how's your week? I'm like, yeah, I got my vaccine, but here's what I really got to tell you about, right? So I got to tell you about Wally's. Let me tell you about Wally's. And I sent him pictures because I was taking pictures there. Like, this place is so cool. And like, I live in the suburbs now, but like I lived in the city of Chicago for like 7 years, and you think like something like that wouldn't impress me, but like I don't know, all the more reason for me to just like get excited about something.
I'll tell you, the only thing I can compare it to is it's kind of like Wawa, and there's this place in Texas called Buc-ee's, but marry them together in the Buc-ee's. The problem in Texas is very, very crowded. There's a lot of people going on. They're massive like Wally's, but this was like Midwestern friendly, and I'm embarrassed to say it, but I'm going to say it anyway. So this was obviously during COVID, and Brian telling me about this, and Hannah and I, my wife, we were like, we need to just go somewhere. Right? We're not going to get on a plane, but we need to go somewhere. And I said, let's make a long weekend, Memorial Day weekend. Let's go to Pontiac, Illinois. She's like, what's in Pontiac, Illinois? I go, I don't know, honey. It's like a nice, wholesome town. What was really there? Wally's. We went 4 times in 3 days. It was amazing. And by the end, everyone was like, oh, you're back. How's it going? They were giving me like discounts. They're like, oh, yeah, we're going to give you the employee discount. It was fantastic. And yeah, that's when I got the shot glass. So,
I mean, you talk about the Midwestern friendliness there. Like, they like greet you genuinely, like, hi, how are you? Like, and like they kind of like, you here for the bathroom? It's right back there. Like they were just like super nice. Yeah, and like you're like, oh, good to see you. Like whatever, just like super nice people, and like you're walking around there, you're like, I could spend all day here. Like, I don't know that like words do it justice. Just the experience of being there, like this is everything you would want under one roof. Like all the things you love about, especially when you're on a road trip. Like you go and you get like all your favorite junk food, but like here it's like all of that, but it doesn't have to just be junk food. Like they're like great things you can like pick up, and like I don't know, man. It's just a sense of well-being walking into a place like that.
So for anyone listening, or no kitschy? Like, where I'm kind of wondering is, like, so in my head when you initially described it, I was thinking south of the border, right? Where you've got all of these different things going on. Or possibly, like, the thing that we saw in Arizona, where it's, like, advertised for maybe 200 miles in advance, and it's a lot of kitsch, right? It's not kitsch, or is it?
It's accented with kitsch.
Okay.
But I think it's very modern with some retro styling to it. So I think their brand is almost timeless in that like a diner, you know what I mean? Kind of thing where like it's just like timeless. Like, yeah, it's probably been here 40, 50, 60 years, but like it doesn't seem dated, but it's all very modern, right? So the architecture of the building is modern, the lighting, the displays are all like very professionally done. Like it's, they're curated in a very special way. They've got everything like they've got like it's almost like a department store where they got like special departments. It's not just a bunch of like magnets and bumper stickers, although I'm sure they have those. It's just like, I don't know, just anything you could want. You could buy a grill there, I think.
Oh yeah.
You could buy like folding chairs, and you could buy like, yeah. It's just like, I think they had like Snoop Dogg wine or something. Like just had like all kinds of like interesting things. It didn't have that like kitschy feeling per se. It just had like a very like welcoming road trip kind of, come on in, we know why you're here. You're here for something to drink, something to eat. You got to make a pit stop. Might as well have stretch your legs and in a place that's enjoyable too. I don't know. Yeah. Pretty cool spot. Definitely recommend Wally's.
I think, Ron, it's a good question. I think the difference between south of the border and Wally's, south of the border, yeah, you get the advertisements and then you go there and it's a little underwhelming, right? I mean, It's fun, but it's underwhelming. Same thing with the thing in Arizona. This is like legitimate, like, oh, this meets everything I want and then some. So, yeah, for anyone listening and you're like, I want to go somewhere this summer, maybe planning a trip, forget the trip, go to Pontiac, Illinois, make a long weekend of it.
Wow. It's all about the journey anyway, right?
That's right.
It's all the journey.
Awesome.
I think their tagline is "Home of the Great American Road Trip."
Ooh, that's nice.
It's nice.
All right, so we got to talk about coffee because I know that you're a fan of coffee. I'm a fan of coffee as well. So let's get into it. I know that with COVID, one of the biggest things that we've kind of seen has been that a lot of us that like going to our local barista have kind of had to settle or come down to try to find something that we can do from home. And everyone kind of has their own routine. What are some of the basic do's and don'ts, especially for somebody who maybe doesn't know much about coffee?
Yeah. So I'm going to start with saying I love coffee so much that I don't drink it and I still love it. And I'll explain that. I drank it for years, love it. I stopped drinking it in April of last year. And the reason I stopped drinking it was purely health reasons. I was just having some digestion issues. It wasn't like caffeine or whatever. It was just like some digestion stuff. And I got really sick one week and didn't have the caffeine for like 4 days. And then was like, you know what? I'm not going to go through any caffeine withdrawal symptoms. Let's see how long I can ride this out. And my digestion issues, without getting into too much detail there, improved. So I'm like, okay. But I still love it. I love smelling it. I love talking about it. I love reading about it. I love thinking about it. I still brew it every single morning for my wife. So I'm still very much, the only difference is I'm not sipping it myself. But to answer your question, Ron, for those that don't know, they want a good cup of coffee, the best thing you can do to improve your cup of coffee experience is to grind your beans fresh. You can even they don't have to be like fancy beans or anything like that, but like getting them fairly freshly roasted and grinding them before you make your cup of coffee is going to probably more than anything else improve your coffee drinking experience.
So that's great advice, especially what you're saying about getting it freshly roasted. I didn't really believe that myself until I actually went to a local roaster and then buy the beans whole. My wife still doesn't quite believe me on this, but buy the beans whole, and then when you grind them up, what that does is it actually releases a lot of the aromatics and gases that normally actually kind of dissipate when you have them just ground. So having it freshly ground opens that up and gives a lot of extra flavor that you pick up through the scent. But question on the grinding, right? So I've heard about these burr grinders, and I've heard about like the machine grinders. What do I need to do when it comes to the grinding of the beans?
So if you're not grinding today, just get a grinder and you'll improve it right away. If you've been grinding or you've got a grinder and you're kind of looking to take the next level, the burr grinder is the way to go for a couple different reasons. The main one is that it creates a more uniform breakdown of the bean. So like you'll get like basically like a triangle, like a diamond shape, I suppose, of your bean, and that will enable more balanced and even extraction. So you basically have uniformity across your grinds, and they all have this shape so that it's able to like extract from like all sides of it pretty equally. So you just get like a better grinding experience when you use a burr grinder, because the other kind, it could also like heat it up too much. You get uneven, like you get like slivers and some chunks. So it's just like really unbalanced and uneven. So the burr grinder eliminates that because it just gives it that uniformity to it.
And the burr grinders, just make sure I understand this. Those are the ones where it's like I spin something around to make it kind of come out at the bottom, right? Where they have like the spinning part on it.
Yeah, you are correct. And in fact, I had one of those for like 2 years. I would grind every single morning. It's like rise and grind, like literally I was grinding. They actually have electric ones that you can buy. So Capresso is the one that I have. And night and day difference in terms of how much effort you have to put into it. Because like I feel like I was like really, or it was very like artisanal, right? Just like I hand grind my beans.
I'm imagining it's like a pepper shaker, the grinding.
It kind of is, yeah. Well, what I used to do too is I would like I worked for a tech company at the time. So like tech companies, well, I still work for a tech company, but like I don't go to an office. I haven't been to an office in a while. But you know, like you can be like very open with like your stuff on your desk, whatever. Like I would have at the time I was really into French press. So I had a French press. I had my burr grinder and a kettle on my desk at work, and I would just like grind. People would hear me. But yeah, you can get an electric burr grinder. Capresso is the brand that I have. It's fantastic. You just put it in there, put your setting, and like it grinds it in like a matter of seconds, as opposed to like minutes of like literally sweating as you're grinding it. But if you want to put in the sweat equity and use some elbow grease, you can definitely do the hand grinder too.
It's a good way to relieve stress in the morning too, right?
Yeah, for sure. and then I think you feel like you really earned the cup of coffee.
Now, so with go on, Alex.
Well, Brian, I was going to say, I assume as a connoisseur, you would only drink coffee black. I mean, do you kind of snub your nose, be honest, a little bit when you add the cream, add the sugar? When you see that, are you like, come on, man?
All right. So I'd only drink it black. That is absolutely true. That's the only way that I would take it. I don't snub my nose because if it's what you like I'm not going to yuck your yum. I think that's a phrase. My wife taught me that. She does
honestly,
improv, and I think that's something in the improv community.
I know that expression, but I never heard that until I moved to the Midwest. I don't know if it's a Midwestern thing, but I know
maybe it's a Midwest
I know
thing.
the phrase.
Yeah. I'm not gonna yuck your yum. Like I'm not gonna if it's something that you enjoy, I'm not gonna take that away from you or be a snob about it. I'm the same way with like whiskey. People are like, I love Scotch, and like people are like, oh, well, you got to drink it neat, or you got to add water, you got to have it on the rocks. It's like, hey, you know what? If you like whiskey, however you like to drink it, enjoy. Like I have a preference and I have reasons for my preference, but I'm not gonna yuck your yum. So same thing with coffee. Like if you like to add a little cream to it, a little sugar, whatever you like. So I make my wife coffee every morning, and she has almond milk and Truvia that I'll put in it for her. And the funny thing is like, I'm literally making it every morning. So I grind, like when I do it in the morning, like I weigh out the beans. So I weigh 24 grams of beans, because I know that there's going to be 2 grams that are somehow lost in the process, like the chaff that gets left behind. Mm-hmm. So I want to get to 22. So I have to start with 24. I use a digital scale. I weigh it out. I grind it. I use it. I do it in a Chemex. And so like I'll wet the filter, and I've got a kettle that I dial in a digital temperature to get the exact temperature I want. Mm-hmm. And I'm making it for her, like it's not even for me. And so then I'll add her almond milk and her Truvia, and it's gotten to the point where like she can't make her own coffee because she doesn't know the quantities of like how much almond milk and stuff I'm putting in, because I apparently make it really well for her, and she's like, I don't know how to replicate. I don't know how much you're putting in, and whatever. And like I'm not weighing. I just eyeball it. So that's like the art of it. So I somehow have consistently gotten that right, but to the point where like if I'm not there, she's not going to be able to get the same coffee.
Wow. So let's talk a little bit more about making the coffee. So we've got, because of what you've taught me, I've gone out, found my local roaster. I've got them freshly roasted just yesterday, in fact. I've grounded it with that burr grinder. I've got this wonderful smelling stuff, right? Now, I hear so much about all these different types of coffee makers, right? I've heard about Chemex. I've got my K-Cup, which is awesome, right? Eh?
That yum I might
yuck. But
I might yuck the Keurig.
But there's like, these drip coffee makers that are
AeroPress,
fairly basic but fairly complex. You've got AeroPress, you've got like these Hario things where it's like they're like ceramic cups that you put on top, and you have to do the conic filter thing.
Yep.
If you wouldn't mind, walk me through a little bit about like why are there so many different ways to make coffee, and are they really that much better?
Yeah, I think it kind of comes down to like what you're looking for out of the taste. So there is a difference, because you get like say a French press, right? Mm-hmm. A French press, you put the coffee grounds in, you add the water, it sits there for a bit, and then you kind of press it down, and it kind of like after that point, after the coffee has extracted into the water, you basically just filter it so that when you pour it, the grounds stay back and you pour the brown liquid out, right? But it's an extraction method where like everything is extracted and you drink everything that's extracted from it. There's no filter as part of it. when you get to like a Chemex or a drip coffee, you've got a filter, so the coffee extracts, but then it goes through the filter and drips, and you drink what is filtered from that point. So there's a lot of oils that are left behind in the filter. So you get those oils from the French press. So you're going to get sort of like a fuller body, like, I don't know if the acid level's higher, I'm not exactly sure, but like it's definitely a different flavor profile that you're going to get. And some people really like that. Some people prefer the like smoother flavor that they're going to get from something filtered, like they would for a Chemex or from a drip coffee. So there's definitely a different experience that you're going to get from it. And, the amount of time that it's sitting there. So like French press, can vary into usually about like 4 minutes that it's sitting there. It's going to be a little bit quicker in a drip scenario. The AeroPress that you mentioned, Alex, is super fast. Like it barely extracts, and just like through pressure. So you just kind of like force through the coffee through a little filter. So that adds a different experience, almost more like an espresso. So like the difference between like heat, pressure, time, all of those things create a different coffee drinking experience. So if you ever think like if you drink an espresso versus, a regular cup of coffee, you could definitely tell the difference. They might have the same amount of caffeine. They might actually have the same amount of like coffee per se, but then one's got more water in it, right? So you're definitely gonna have a different experience if you brew it a different way.
So what about these percolators? Like those were always a thing like in the 50s and 60s. I don't see anything with those anymore. Are they just that bad, or was it just kind of like a forgotten art we're just going to forget about?
I think it's a forgotten art. I think also, so I remember like when I was a kid, I was like 12, and I know my dad would make it out of a percolator, and I would drink it then. And I just remember there'd be like a lot of, I think it was watery, and there were a lot of coffee grounds left over. So like I think it was really hard to control the way that it, extracted, and then like the coffee grounds would still be there. So just kind of wasn't like that pleasant of an experience as I remember it. I haven't done a percolator in years, but I didn't hate the coffee per se, but it was like, kind of getting your teeth, and be like some parts would be kind of watery. It depends on the batch. So I think that's probably why. I think it maybe just gone out of favor for that reason.
Yeah. And
Brian,
and then when it comes
I want to go.
Like, go on, Alex.
Brian, I want to go from one extreme and then to the other extreme. I have to ask. So let's say you're at a friend's place, right? You can't have your setup unless you bring it with you. Is there any grocery store brand coffees? I'm talking Folgers, Maxwell House, Community. Is any of them tolerable, or are you just like, I'm not going to have coffee. I'm going to, at a minimum, run out to the Starbucks?
Yeah. The good news is grocery stores typically carry a really great spectrum of coffee these days. So you're not as likely today to run into that same problem. However, there is sort of like I have an affinity for Nescafe instant coffee.
Instant.
So instant coffee. Yeah. So like I love to travel, and a lot of times in like European hotel rooms, you'll find like Nescafe, like instant coffee.
I was going to say that.
And
how very European.
And I've collected them. Yeah, how very European. Yeah. So I've got some from like Greece and some from Italy. And it's actually not bad. And I think like Starbucks Via, kind of the same thing. Like I think the reason for it, and like I haven't really looked into like the rationale, but my guess is that I think it's like flash frozen kind of thing and like preserved. So I think it's like preserved at the peak freshness. So sort of like it's ground or whatever, and then preserved in that state in a better way than like others would be. I don't know. I could be wrong, but like if someone's got some just like Nescafe, I'm gonna go ahead and say like, hey, that's probably not too bad.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. And then on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, I'm going to butcher the name, but there's that brand, is it Kopi Luwak Coffee, which a lot of people have probably heard about. It's coffee that the beans actually were digested by this little rodent, right? And then someone goes out and picks the beans, and they say it's great, and it's like $100 a cup. Have you had that? And if you have, or even if you haven't, what's is that just a giant gimmick to take money from people, or is it really what it is?
I had the same question, and like most things in life, I love to research it and just try to figure out like, is it worth it? So I did some reading on it and was tempted to try it. But in my research found that it seems that it's mostly a gimmick. And, would I try it? Of course. Am I going to go out of my way to try it? No, but I think it's mostly a gimmick. And I think that, and that's not to say I don't fall for gimmicks, because I fall for gimmicks all the time. I'll tell you about a coffee gimmick here in a moment. But like, I would try it if you had it. Hey, you got to try this. Absolutely. Am I going to order it, go out of my way for it? Probably not. And mostly because it's like, I think it's, from whatever, it's actually not that good of a coffee. And so it's like, I'd be paying this premium for something that's like not even considered good.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that myth is busted.
All right. So here's a few quick questions. These are going to be quick fire ones. All right. So you have your pick of coffee from all over the world. Where would you want coffee from? Is there a specific place or a specific mountain?
Very specific. I would get Peaberry coffee from Kauai Coffee Company in Kauai, Hawaii.
Okay. Next, roast. What kind of roast are you going for?
I would go for I'm going to go with a dark roast.
Okay. Nice.
Yep.
And then the last question. Are you going to order it with any extra espresso or just have it just kind of black by itself?
Just black by itself.
I like it.
Fair enough. Let me ask you this, because Ron's a big tea guy. Do you enjoy tea as well? Is there sort of I'm curious if the average tea person is also a big coffee guy. Is vice versa? Is there sort of a cross between the two? Or are people like, I'm a coffee guy, screw tea, and vice versa?
Yeah, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. What I've started to do instead of drinking coffee in the morning is I still like to have some hot beverage. So I've switched to it's a decaf chai by Celestial Seasons. Mm-hmm. Is it Celestial Seasons or Seasonings?
I think it's Seasonings. Could be wrong though.
Seasonings, yeah. It's called Bengal Spice, and it is basically it's a decaf chai. So I'll have that, and then in the evenings they've got like an apple what is it? It's a spiced apple tea. My wife and I call it bone apple tea. Anyway, so I'll have that in the evening. So I'm not really. I think you can cross over and become a connoisseur. Like I've had some really nice like oolong tea and really nice like black tea. And like I had a friend who was of Chinese descent, and she taught me about like how to properly brew black tea and like how you're like actually not supposed to like have it in a tea bag. She thought it was so strange Americans did that. Like supposed to just have the tea leaves there and you could reuse them a few times. So I've learned a few things over the years. No way would I want to be on a podcast talking about my knowledge of tea. I think I'm just exhausted right there and everything that I know about tea, except for the fact that I love sipping a hot beverage. It's been a good replacement in the morning for me to like sit down and have something hot to sip with my wife in the morning. But I'm by no means any kind of expert in it.
Awesome. Yeah, I think for tea, it's something too where, not to yuck on everyone's yum. I need to work on my phrasing for that, but everyone's kind of got their own thing that they like, right? And whether that's tea, whether that's coffee, it is kind of interesting too, where you kind of also even have some of the purists as well, where I think I see that in tea and in coffee culture, where people are like, no, don't add anything to it. And there is a lot of kind of science that also goes into the way that you brew it and how you enjoy it. But at the end of the day, all that matters is people find something that they like to drink.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's room for like conversation around these things, right? Like, oh, how are you doing it, or what are you experiencing? Like, I think that is like part of the process too. Like when you're, an enthusiast with anything, you want to be involved in like a discourse about it, right? And like to come in with like judgment of like, oh, you're doing it wrong or whatever. Like I love to learn. Like I'm so passionate about like coffee, for example. I'm so passionate about it that like I love when people correct me or give me like insights. Like I recently learned about like I'm talking about like the temperature that I dial in. Like the slurry needs to be at a certain temperature. So like I got like a digital thermometer out to like see that like not just the temperature. It's it's like they're like once it actually reaches the grounds, what's the temperature? Like I just recently came across that. So like it's about what can you learn? How can you try things differently? What is somebody else like? They turn you on to something new. Like that's where you can create like a lifelong enjoyment of something because you're constantly like leveling up in your knowledge about it.
Wow. That's awesome. Let me ask you this. You said you stopped drinking coffee in April. Does that mean you have taken caffeine completely out of your diet over the last 8 months?
I would say, yeah, to like about 99.9%. So I had some family in town a couple months ago, and we went to the Starbucks roastery in Chicago. For those that don't know,
4 stories.
I think 5. Oh, is it 4 floors? Whatever. Yeah, 4 floors. Specialty coffee bars, whatever. It's like it's not your typical Starbucks. My wife got something, and like she couldn't finish it, and I drank like probably a quarter of it. Like that was the first time I had caffeine in a while. My eyes went woo, so I really enjoyed that. And then I think, I'm trying to think another caffeine experience. I had like someone gave me like a black iced tea or something like that. But for the most part, other than like those 2 moments, I really haven't had any caffeine since April 21.
That's incredible. I mean, I know this is probably not accurate, but I've always, as a rule of thumb, I say, a cup of coffee is about 100 milligrams of caffeine. That's what I've always told myself. At your prime, how much caffeine were you consuming a day?
I never really had that much. I think I might have had 4 cups a day at my peak. A couple in the morning, maybe 1 or 2 in the afternoon. Nothing crazy. I was never really like a caffeine. It wasn't really about the caffeine for me. The caffeine was a nice side effect, but I think it was more about like the coffee for me than anything else.
You went from 400 a day, 400 milligrams. I'm just ballparking to 0.
Yeah. Well, when I stopped, I was actually probably only about 100 milligrams.
I see.
It was probably like 100 milligrams. And then I was sick, so like I was just out of it for like 4 days. And so I think any caffeine withdrawal was probably happening concurrently with me just like feeling miserable in bed. So when I felt good again, I was like, well, I guess the caffeine's out of my system. Let's see if I can roll with this. And that was like sort of the trial period.
Is talking about coffee right now, is this agonizing for you as someone who doesn't drink coffee now? Like, is this like...
No, because I still make it every day. I still love it. Like that's the thing. Like I love it so much that even if I'm not drinking it, it's still a great thing. It kind of reminds me of the woman who was in charge of the launch of Mike's Hard Lemonade. So I think was it the Boston Beer Company? Is that who was affiliated with Mike's Hard? I think so.
Yeah, I remember. Well, she did that documentary. What was it? Beer Wars.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So she's allergic to alcohol.
Yep.
So like she launched this category of like hard lemonade and couldn't even consume it because she was allergic to alcohol. But she appreciated the culture of, the drinking culture and, whatever. So like, so I mean, it's like, that was like, I use her as like a role model in this of like, you could still appreciate a lot of things about it. Like I love fast cars. I don't drive fast, but I still love fast cars.
Fair.
It's kind of the same thing.
Fair. Well, that's really, really cool. Ron, do you have any last questions about coffee or tea?
Nah, I think I've grilled you enough, and thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thanks for grilling me and not roasting me.
Touché.
Brian, it's been an absolute pleasure. Really interesting talking with you. Thank you for being on the podcast.